The Zen Environment by Marian Mountain. Counting to 10. Every morning after I've made the beds, washed the breakfast dishes, dusted and vacuumed, I fill the 2 bird feeders on the front desk with birdseed. As soon as I leave, the black and blue Stellar's jays, which have been keeping a lookout from the tall pines to the south, swoop in and begin jostling each other for the best perches on the feeders. The meal is a lively one, accompanied by loud squawks and flapping wings. Seeds and feathers fly in every direction. Stellar's jays are rather lowbrow creatures, loud-mouthed and macho. They are clever imitators of other birds' calls, especially the scream of the red-tailed hawk. Jays chase away most of their well-mannered birds in their territory, but not all of them. Drawn by the cries of the Stellar's jays, an aristocratic family of red-headed acorn woodpeckers are approaching the deck. All of the jays depart abruptly, all that is except one young and inexperienced bird. A sharp peck from the beak of the eldest woodpecker sends the young jay crying to its mama. With their red-capped heads and their black and white wings, the woodpeckers are beautiful, and they know it. They are well-mannered in their habits. Each finds a place around the feeder, and none, not even the youngest, throws food on the floor. When they're finished with their meal, they leave together. The jays straggle back to the bird feeders one by one, and the young ones pick at their food, and then they fly off. And the older jays stay longer, but they do more squawking than eating. By the time the last one leaves, the porch is a mess. If our thinking mind is very rebellious, we may give it an exercise during Zazen to keep it out of mischief until it begins to settle down. The first exercise often given to Zen students is the one of counting their breaths from 1 to 10. Sometimes the student is instructed to count the inhalation of the breath as 1, and the exhalation is 2, and so on, till he reaches 10. Then the process starts over again. Sometimes only the inhalations are counted, sometimes only the exhalations. This is the method recommended by Suzuki Roshi. But all students are instructed to count to 10 and no further. Quite often, especially at first, a student is not able to reach the number 10 before his mind begins to wander off to some train of thought. When this happens, no matter how often, the student should be careful not to be critical of his performance or to feel that he's failed in any way. As soon as he discovers the fact that he's not counting his breaths, but is daydreaming, he should simply take note of the fact and return to the exercise of counting his breaths, beginning with the number 1. The practice of Zazen is not setting up some goal, such as counting to 10 perfectly over and over for a period of Zazen. In the practice of Zazen, we are not in competition with anyone, not even with ourselves. Some days it'll be easy to concentrate. Other days it'll be very difficult. And as long as we continue the practice of Zazen, through settled mental weather and unsettled, the practice will carry us to the heart of our original nature. Each time we return from our mind wandering, we return to the center of our Zen practice, the center of our Zen environment. Very often, the exercise of counting breaths from 1 to 10 is considered a preliminary Zen training exercise, a preparation for the real practice of Zazen. But Suzuki Roshi did not consider it so. In order to emphasize this point, he once had his students at Zen Shinzi Monastery concentrate for a whole session. A whole session. All right, let me just explain here. This word is spelled a little bit differently. And it says in brackets, a period of intensive meditation lasting a week. Okay, on nothing but the exercise of counting breaths. All students, advanced and beginning, and even the Roshi, practiced counting breaths from 1 to 10. Suzuki Roshi said that those students who wished could keep this practice up for the rest of their lives. Considered from this viewpoint, the true Zen practice, the exercise of counting breaths, is no less enlightening than the more advanced practice of shikantaza, or themeless meditation. Counting breaths from 1 to 10, when done with wholehearted attention, can become a kind of mantra. Mantra is a Sanskrit word for a mystical or magical word or formula, which is spoken over and over, out loud or silently, in order to awaken original nature. The Hindu sound of Om is used as a mantra to help bring the worshipper to the realization of his original nature, what the Hindus called Brahman. The Lord's Prayer is used by Christians to bring them closer to their original nature, which they call God. In the Buddhist sect of Jodo Shin, the mantra Namu Amida Butsu, adoration to the Buddha Amida, is believed by all devotees to be the most effective method of crossing over from the shore of ignorance and suffering to the shore of original nature, which the Shin Buddhists call the Pure Land of Amida Buddha. The Zen Buddhist koan of Mu has the power of a mantra. Actually, the magic power of the mantra, like the magic power of the mudra, is not something supernatural. When the meditating student fills his mind day and night with nothing but the sound and the thought of the mantra, he interrupts the habitual flow of self-centered thoughts that normally dominate and disturb and distort his pure awareness. The mantra may be like an The mantra may be like an erase head on a tape recorder. The perfect erase head is shikantaza, or themeless meditation. Shikantaza allows the self-centered thoughts to flow uninterruptedly through the mind, but erases the attachment to the thoughts. Shikantaza requires a good balance of mind and body to be effective, but it is so seldom given to beginning students. And so it is seldom given to beginning students. The devotional mantras, such as the Lord's Prayer and the Amida Buddha Prayer, are perhaps the easiest for religiously minded people to accept wholeheartedly. But this type of mantra leaves a film of religious attachment, covering pure awareness. Zen Buddhist koans leave no trace of holiness, but they require the regular adjustment of a Zen master over a long period of time to erase all thoughts of intellectual activity. The exercise of counting breaths from 1 to 10 is perhaps the safest mantra for a student who must practice without a Zen teacher. He is not apt to get caught by the exercise in some religious hallucination, as not apt to get trapped in a dualistic impasse. Counting over and over from 1 to 10 may seem very dull and mechanical, but it can become a very enlightening practice. In traditional Zen training, a student practices with a Zen master for at least 10 years before he begins to teach others. Before I began to practice Zazen, I thought that this meant that it took at least 10 years before a student could become an expert at Zen. I thought that acquiring Zen training was something like acquiring the skills of a musician or a surgeon, but I discovered Zen is not as simple as this. After I began the practice of Zazen and learned the exercise of counting breaths, I thought that becoming an adept of Zen was something like the ability to return to the unspoiled mind of a child. But Zazen is not as simple as this either. The simplicity of Zen is beyond the usual categories of beginner or expert. 10 is a combination of two symbols, the symbol for the number 1, which represents something, and the symbol for the 0, which represents nothing. It is important to remember that the history of mankind, the discovery of the numbers representing something, came long before the discovery of the symbol which represents nothing. One of my Zen teachers, Koban Chino Roshi, once said that Zen is to life what the 0 is to mathematics. He said the discovery of the 0 made mathematics possible. He pointed out that, in one sense, there is no value to Zen, just as there is no value to the 0. But just as the 0 expands the possibilities of mathematics immeasurably, so Zen infinitely expands the possibilities of our life. When we begin the exercise of counting our breaths in Zazen, we begin with number 1. We do not begin with 0. It's easier for us to understand something than to understand nothing. It's easier to meditate on a theme than on no theme. It is only when we arrive at the number 10, or completion, that we become aware of the 0 or nothing. Actually, when we arrive at the number 10, we have already gone back to number 1 and to the realm that includes all numbers. Number 10 is the number which represents both the beginning, 1, or the beginner's mind, and the end, 10, or the expert's mind, as well as everything in between, plus 0, nothing, or original mind. This nothing is sometimes called vast emptiness, or sunyata, or nirvana, or Buddha nature, which are all different names for the same nothingness. Suzuki Roshi said once that he had discovered that it is necessary, absolutely necessary, to believe in nothing. That is, we have to believe in something which has no form, no color, something which exists before all forms and colors appear. Something like the 0, which by itself has no value, but when combined with something else has infinite value. Mathematics begins with the discovery of the nothingness of the 0. Our life begins with the discovery of the nothingness of Zen. When Zen is completely united with our life, our old self-imposed limitations fall away. We become aware of our total environment. So 10 years of Zen practice, or counting to 10 in Zazen, is the realization, or making real, of something which is nothing. It is the discovery of our original nature. Recently, I have discovered that it is necessary, absolutely necessary, for survival to acquire the habit of going back to the beginning. This is one of the most important habits that we can acquire from the enlightening Zen practice of counting breaths from 1 to 10. When we lose count during the Zen exercise, we are instructed to return to the beginning and start over. If we reach the goal, we are also instructed to return to the beginning and start over. Counting practice is one of the basic activities of our original mind. There is a big difference between the activity of our original mind and the usual activity of our thinking mind. When our thinking mind loses count, it gets distracted and it wanders way off the track. And if our thinking mind arrives at its goal, it wants to continue on, counting to 100, 1,000, or 1,000,000. Our thinking mind loves to complicate and refine something that is already complete. Our thinking mind always tries to improve upon the perfect practice of our original nature. Applied to everyday life, counting practice means that when we find that we have lost our touch, when our work has become confusing or complicated, or if we find ourselves stuck in a rut, we should not try to go forward, as the thinking mind always wants to do, but we should try to go back to the beginning and start over again, concentrating on the beginning practice of Zazen. And if we find that we have reached our goal, that our life has become complete, clear, uncomplicated, it is going forward successfully, then we should still return to the beginning and start over. If we continue on and on up the ladder of success, our thinking mind will complicate and confuse our success. These are two excellent ways of going back. There are two excellent ways of going back to the beginning after having reached a goal. One is to become a teacher of beginning students, and the other is to become a student in a new field. Both of these positions encourage us to return to our beginner's mind. When Zen Buddhism reaches a certain point of refinement in a person or a culture, it is moved by its original nature onto a new person or a new culture. Japanese Zen Buddhism is very refined today. It has been polished to perfection. So in order to survive, it has moved west to a new culture. We in America today live in a most important and exciting period of Zen Buddhism, a period that can completely revolutionize not only the American Zen spirit, but also the Japanese Zen spirit. But the Zen practice of returning to the beginning is not limited to Zen Buddhism. This practice is the key to survival of all religions, and this practice is important in all activities of our life, in politics, art, economics, science, business, marriage, child rearing, teaching, or in whatever fields we might be engaged. Often we hear the mass-produced thinking mind proclaiming, "It's impossible to go back," and because we have lost touch with the basic practice of our original nature, we go along with the argument and we allow our lives to become more and more complicated, more and more restricted, and more carried away by gadgets and frivolous attachments. This is why it's necessary, absolutely necessary, not only for personal survival, but for the survival of our culture and for the survival of the human race, to put more emphasis on the basic Zen practice of counting our breaths from 1 to 10.